podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of us are maybe a little afraid of. Talking smoothly and quickly without using all those filler words like and
Yeah.
We've got a podcast episode as our source material today, and it's all about speaking without pausing. It's packed with practical advice, and I think this is going to be really fun to dive into.
Oh, yeah. I'm really interested to see what they have to say because, speaking, I mean, that can help anybody out there, really, no matter what you're doing or how much experience you have.
Absolutely. It's all about that, harnessing the power of your voice.
Yeah.
And making sure you can get your message across clearly. So this episode really dives right into why speaking quickly and confidently can be so hard.
Right.
And it's not just as simple as knowing what you want to say.
No, not at all. It's more complicated than that. There's like a lot of different things happening in your brain when you're trying to talk. You have to think of the thoughts and then organize those thoughts, and then you got to turn those thoughts into words.
Right.
And then all of that is happening while you're also thinking about all the social stuff going on around you and all the anxieties that come up, when you're talking to other people.
Oh yeah. Well, when you break it down like that, it's amazing that any of us can speak at all.
Right.
But I think a lot of us can relate to those moments where our brain is lagging behind.
Yeah.
And that's where the ums and likes come in, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source, they call those filler words. They call them crutches. It's your brain's way of giving you a little bit more time to catch up with what you're trying to say.
Oh, interesting.
And they can be a much bigger problem for people with ADHD,
I was just thinking about that, because the source mentions how ADHD can make things even more complicated.
Yeah.
What's the connection there? Why is that?
Well, if you have ADHD, those executive functioning skills we've talked about before, things like planning and organizing and stopping yourself from doing things, it can be much harder, than for people who don't. And then you apply all of that to speaking, then your thoughts might come out jumbled and disorganized, and then you have more pauses and filler words as they're trying to figure out what to say.
Oh, so it's like a traffic jam in their brain,
Yeah.
And the words are just trying to merge onto the highway.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's actually research to back this up. They've done studies, and they've shown that people with ADHD, they use more filler words, and they hesitate more when they're speaking than neurotypical people.
Right, so it's not just a matter of trying harder or thinking faster. It's like there's a real neurological component at play here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important to understand all the different challenges that people have. It's not about blaming anyone. It's just recognizing that everybody's different and different people are going to need different approaches.
Right. That's a really good point. And, just hearing you say that, I'm already starting to rethink all those times when I get caught up in my words.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm failing personally. It's my brain.
Yeah.
It's just trying to do its best.
Right.
Thankfully, the episode doesn't just tell us all the problems, it also gives us some practical advice to help improve our fluency. And they start with something that surprised me, breathing.
Yes. This is something I'm a huge fan of, actually. They really focus on diaphragmatic breathing as the foundation for speaking better. And when you think about it, speaking, that's all about breathing.
Okay, so how does that diaphragmatic breathing actually work? And what makes it so special for speaking? I've heard about it, but I've never really understood how it connects.
So diaphragmatic breathing, it's all about your diaphragm, right? That's
Yeah.
the muscle that's sitting underneath your lungs. So when you breathe diaphragmatically, you're taking these deep breaths, and it's filling up your belly, not just your chest.
Right.
And that means you're using as much of your lung capacity as you can, and that gives you this steady stream of air that really supports your voice.
Oh, so it's like giving your voice a nice strong foundation to stand on.
Yeah.
So instead of, running out of breath when you're in the middle of a sentence, you have all this extra air that can help you get through it.
Exactly. And there are actually physiological benefits to this too.
Oh, really?
Diaphragmatic breathing can help to regulate your heart rate, and it can reduce muscle tension, and it can even calm your nervous system down, all of which can help you to speak more confidently.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would be really helpful, especially for someone who gets nervous when they're talking.
Right.
It's like building that inner calm from the ground up.
And the best part is that you can practice it anywhere, anytime. Even just a few minutes of diaphragmatic breathing every day can make a really big difference.
Okay. I'm definitely going to be adding that to my to-do list.
Yeah.
So breathing's the foundation. But what about those pauses and filler words? the episode has some tips to deal with those, right?
Yes, and they're actually pretty simple. The first one is, it's called mindful speaking.
Okay, that sounds kind of vague.
Mm-hmm.
How do you practice being mindful when you're talking? It seems like I would have to meditate for an hour to be able to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. But mindful speaking, it's not about like emptying your mind or achieving some kind of, Zen state. It's really just about being present in the moment, being present in the conversation. It's taking a second, just a really quick pause before you speak and thinking about what you're going to say and then saying it with purpose.
Right. So instead of letting those words just tumble out, you're taking control of your thoughts,
Yeah.
and steering them in the right direction.
Exactly. And that small pause, even if it's just a split second, can make such a huge difference. It gives your brain that time to organize your thoughts and choose your words carefully. And then you end up using less filler words because you already know what you want to say.
I never thought of it that way, but that makes so much sense.
Right.
It's like hitting the pause button on your internal monologue.
Yeah.
And then you can press play again and you know what you're going to say.
Exactly. It's really just a small change in how you think, but it can have a huge impact on how well you speak. And it's not just for people who, struggle with speaking. Everybody can benefit from it.
Right. Okay, mindful speaking. Got it. What's the next tip?
Okay, so the next tip is about using pauses strategically. And I know that sounds kind of weird.
Yeah.
We're trying to use less pauses, and now we're being told to use them more.
I know. It seems like the opposite of what we should be doing.
I know. It's about understanding that not all pauses are the same. Some pauses, they're filled with ums and ahs, and they just interrupt the flow and make you sound unsure of yourself. But when you use pauses strategically, when you choose when to be silent, it can actually make what you're saying sound better.
Okay, so it's like the difference between like a dramatic pause in a movie,
Oh, yeah.
that builds suspense, and a record skipping in the middle of a song. One is intentional, it's part of the experience. The other one is jarring and distracting.
You got it. So think about those strategic pauses like punctuation for your words. If you pause in the right spot, you can emphasize something, or you can give your listener time to think about what you just said. Or you can even make what you're saying sound more important.
Oh, that's so interesting. So it's about being in control of how you speak and using those silences to guide the listener through what you're trying to say.
Exactly. And when you get good at that, it can really take your speaking to the next level.
Okay, on to tip number 3. What's the magic solution for those filler words?
Okay, this one is about expanding your vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
The source, they make a really good point that, if you don't know a lot of words, you're going to end up using more filler words. When you don't have the right word on the tip of your tongue, you use those filler words while you're searching for it.
It's like when you're trying to explain something complicated, but you're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And you end up talking around it and using vague words or filler words because you just don't have the right word to make your point clear.
Exactly. And like any skill, vocabulary, you can work on it and get better over time. The more words you know, the less you'll need to use those filler words.
So it's like weight training for your vocabulary. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. And it's not just about sounding smarter. When you have a better vocabulary, you can express yourself more clearly, you can make your ideas more nuanced, and you can connect with your audience on a much deeper level.
Okay, so we've got breathing exercises, mindful speaking, strategic pauses, and vocabulary expansion. That's a great start. But this episode has a lot more to offer, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. This is just the beginning. The source goes on to talk about more hands-on ways to practice. They talk about something that might remind you of being a kid.
Oh, really?
Tongue twisters.
Tongue twisters. As adults.
Yes.
You're kidding. I'm in. I'm in.
Let's see what they have to say.
Let's do it.
So are you ready to unleash that inner child and try out some tongue twisters?
Yeah, let's do it. I got to say, I'm a little rusty, but I'm always up for a challenge, especially if it means I can become a better speaker.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, do tongue twisters really work for adults?
Yeah.
It seems like something you do in elementary school,
I know, it sounds silly, but there really is a reason for it. Tongue twisters, they're like a secret weapon to getting better at pronunciation and enunciation and just being more fluent overall. It makes you really pay attention to how you're forming those words and you're using all those muscles in your mouth.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. It's like a workout for your tongue.
Exactly.
They're strengthening those muscles that help you speak more clearly.
And the episode, they actually recommend finding some tongue twisters online. There's tons of resources out there, from the classic ones like she sells seashells by the seashore to some really obscure ones. It's fun and it's a brain workout at the same time.
I can already imagine myself stumbling over Peter Piper picked a pick of pickled peppers. But, if it helps me speak more clearly and more confidently, I'm all in. What other practice techniques do they recommend?
Well, besides the tongue twisters, they also talk about speed drills.
Speed drills.
Yeah.
For speaking.
Yeah. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's basically practicing speaking faster than you normally would. So you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. And you're training your brain and your mouth to work together better.
Oh, so it's like sprinting for your speaking muscles.
Exactly. And the key is to start off slow, and then as you get better, you can gradually increase the speed.
Yeah, you don't want to jump into a marathon without warming up first.
Exactly. And one thing I really like about this episode is that it doesn't just focus on, those old school techniques. It also talks about how technology can help us improve our speaking skills.
Oh, interesting. What do they say?
Well, they talk about speech recognition software.
Oh, okay.
As a good way to get feedback on things like your pace, your clarity, and pronunciation.
So you could use that to record yourself talking, and then you get an objective analysis of how you sound.
Exactly. Like having a speech coach in your pocket.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And there are even apps designed just for speech exercises and pronunciation drills. Technology can really help us to improve ourselves.
Yeah. It's amazing how many resources are out there these days. But I think it's also important to remember that sometimes it's not just about the techniques or the technology. It's about the mental side of things.
Right.
Especially when it comes to speaking anxiety.
You're right. And the source, they talk about anxiety, especially for people with ADHD, as being a big obstacle to speaking well.
Yeah, because when you're anxious, it's like your thoughts are racing, your heart's beating faster, and it's hard to even think straight, let alone speak fluently.
Right. And so the episode talks about how important it is to practice in environments where you feel comfortable.
Oh, okay.
So you could start by talking to your friends or your family.
Right.
Or even just recording yourself speaking alone. The key is to build up that confidence in settings where the stakes aren't so high.
That makes sense. And for people who want something more structured, the episode suggests looking into public speaking courses or even working with a speech coach.
Right.
It's like having a personal trainer, but for your voice.
Exactly. And, they can give you personalized advice and help you to overcome those specific things that are holding you back. It's really investing in yourself and your ability to communicate.
So we've got breathing exercises and tongue twisters and technology. And the episode also reminds us about the importance of mindset. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more area that I want to touch on, and that's resources and next steps.
Yeah, it's great to learn about all these techniques and strategies, but what's even more important is actually using them. And this episode gives us some really good tips for continuing to learn and improve.
So what kind of resources do they recommend for people who want to keep working on their speaking skills?
Well, first of all, they talk about all the online courses that are out there that are designed specifically to help people get better at speaking faster and more fluently.
Oh, that's great. I bet these courses cover everything we've talked about today, right?
Yeah.
Breathing exercises, vocal techniques, how to get rid of those pauses and filler words.
Yeah, they give you a really structured approach to learning these skills.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
And in addition to those online courses, they also talk about a more traditional resource, for practicing public speaking, and that is Toastmasters.
Oh, yeah, Toastmasters. I've heard so much about that. I've heard it's really great.
It's a great way to practice speaking in a safe environment where people are supportive and you can get good feedback.
Yeah, it's like a gym for your speaking muscles.
Exactly. So there's really no shortage of ways to keep improving your speaking skills, whether it's through those online courses or groups like Toastmasters or any of the other things we've talked about.
Exactly. It's just about finding what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then taking those next steps.
And you know what I find really inspiring? It's never too late to start. No matter how much experience you have, there's always room to grow.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a perfect way to transition into the outro of this episode. One of the things that really stood out to me about this podcast was that it wasn't just focused on the mechanics of speaking, but it also highlighted the importance of mindset and believing in yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll remind us that becoming a better speaker, it's not just about mastering techniques. It's about enjoying the process and believing that you can actually get better.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to hear your thoughts. What's the one thing you're taking away from all of this? What really stuck with you?
Well, for me, it's that fluency. It's not about reaching some end goal. It's more about the journey. It's about making small changes over time and being happy about the progress you make along the way. And, even really good speakers, they still mess up sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's just part of being human. What about you? What's sticking with you?
I really like that. It takes all the pressure off, to be perfect.
Yeah.
And it lets you just focus on getting better. And speaking of getting better, the episode ends with a really interesting question, and I think it captures that idea perfectly.
Oh, what is it?
It asks, what one small change will you implement today to improve your speaking? And I just love how it emphasizes that, it doesn't have to be some huge change,
Right.
It can be these tiny little steps that over time add up to big results.
That's so true. It could be something as simple as doing some of that diaphragmatic breathing for a few minutes every morning.
Right.
Or just trying to be more mindful the next time you have a conversation. Even those little things can make you a lot more fluent and a lot more confident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I really like about all this is that it makes improving your speaking seem achievable. It's not about going to some expensive workshop or hiring a coach.
Right.
It's about taking control of how you communicate and making these small changes that work for you.
I totally agree. And one thing that's really hit home for me during this whole deep dive is that it changes how we look at those challenges. Like, instead of seeing those times when we hesitate or we stumble over our words as failures, we can see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
That's a great point. It's about being kinder to ourselves. We all have those moments, even the best speakers in the world.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of being human. And that reminds me of another key takeaway from this episode practice. Fluency is like a muscle. You have to work it out regularly.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, there are so many ways to practice, like tongue twisters, speed drills, joining a group like Toastmasters, or just paying more attention when you're talking to people every day. The important thing is to find what you like and make it a habit.
And, speaking of practice, one of the things I really appreciate about this podcast is that it gives us a space to learn and grow together.
Yeah.
We're all on this journey to become better communicators.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn a lot from each other's experiences.
It's so great to be able to talk about these things and share our perspectives,
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to hear from you. What's the one small change you're going to make today to improve your speaking? Share your story with us, ask questions, keep this conversation going.
We're all in this together, and we can learn so much from each other.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, remember to practice those strategic pauses, embrace that mindful speaking, and remember that becoming a more confident and fluent speaker is an ongoing adventure.
See you next time.